My name is Alara. I'm 60 years old, and I've spent my entire life with one love: music. New Orleans in 2020 wasn't the same city I knew in the 70s, but the soul of jazz still lived in every corner. The French Quarter at night glowed with neon and saxophone wails, the air thick with gumbo spice and cigarette smoke. I wasn't the headliner anymore. Those days had passed. But I was still respected, known as the quiet matriarch who nurtured new talent. One of those talents was a young man named Julian. 24, smooth voice, slick hair, a trumpet player with fire in his lungs. I took him under my wing like a son, showed him my notebooks, decades of scribbled melodies, fragments of lyrics, rhythms that came to me in dreams. He called me Maestra. He said I was his guiding star, and I believed him, until the night I turned on the radio. It was a local station playing a live broadcast from a jazz club downtown. The host's voice boomed, and now, the rising star, Julian Cole, performing his original composition, Midnight Reverie. My heart froze. The first notes drifted through the speakers, and I nearly dropped my coffee. That wasn't his song. It was mine. A melody I had written 30 years ago in a notebook no one but me had touched. The syncopation, the aching rise of the trumpet line, all of it stolen, wrapped in his name. I sat in the dark, shaking. He had taken my life's work, my identity as a composer, and passed it off as his own. The betrayal burned. I thought of every late night in the club, every time I encouraged him, told him to trust his voice, and this was his answer: to erase mine. The next day, I confronted him backstage after his show. "Julian," I said, my voice low, my hands trembling, "that song you played, that was mine." He didn't even flinch, just smiled, all charm and arrogance. "Maestra, you must be mistaken. I wrote that one months ago, but don't worry. Your influence is all over my work. I'll always credit you as my inspiration." Inspiration. The word cut deeper than a knife. I walked away that night, but inside, something was breaking. For 60 years, I had given my soul to music. And now, the protégé I trusted most had stolen not just a melody, but my legacy. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my chest tight with anger and grief. The jazz world was buzzing about Julian, calling him a genius, a prodigy, the future of the scene. And I knew if I stayed silent, my name, my real work, would be forgotten. But deep down, a fire began to build. If he wanted to steal my voice, then I would show him what happens when the real owner takes the stage. The days after Julian's theft felt like walking through smoke. Everywhere I turned, radios, posters, whispers in clubs, his name blared. Julian Cole, the prodigy of New Orleans. They played my song at every venue. Each time, it was like a knife twisting deeper. I tried to practice at home, but my hands trembled on the piano keys. The trumpet, sitting in its velvet case, felt heavy with betrayal. For the first time in 60 years, music tasted bitter. Mara, an old friend from my band days, came by one afternoon. She listened quietly as I paced the living room, fury spilling out of me. "He called me his maestra," I hissed. "And then he stole my soul's work. I gave him everything, Mara. Everything." She looked at me with the weary eyes of someone who had seen too many betrayals in this industry. "Baby, the music scene's full of sharks, but you've still got bite left. Don't let him take that too." Her words stuck. Bite left. That night, I walked the French Quarter alone. The streets shimmered with brass bands, couples dancing, the smell of fried shrimp in the air. I passed by the Blue Magnolia Club, the same stage where I had once debuted, back when I was Julian's age. And I saw his poster plastered outside: Julian Cole, Midnight Reverie, sold out. Something in me snapped. I couldn't out-youth him, couldn't out-charm him. The scene wanted young faces, flashy smiles. But there was one thing he didn't have: my legacy. I still had songs, unreleased pieces, melodies no one else had touched, locked in notebooks yellowed with age, songs the world had never heard. And suddenly the plan bloomed in my mind. I wouldn't confront him again, wouldn't beg the industry to listen. I would show them. A surprise concert. One night, one stage. I'd play the unreleased songs live. Let the world hear them from me first. Let them know who the real composer was. But pulling it off wouldn't be easy. The clubs cared about money, not respect. And who would book a 60-year-old woman over a golden boy darling of the scene? Even my old contacts had moved on or closed shop. Still, as I walked through the quarter, my pulse quickened. For the first time since the betrayal, I felt alive. If he thought he could erase me, he was about to learn. I hadn't played my final note. The next morning, I pulled my old leather notebooks from the shelf. The pages were yellowed, frayed, but the notes still danced on them, alive and waiting. I sat at the piano, my fingers trembling. Slowly, I played a tune I had written in 1985, one no one had ever heard. The room filled with aching beauty, and for the first time since Julian's betrayal, my chest loosened. "This is still mine," I whispered. But music alone wasn't enough. I needed a stage. So I started calling. First, the Blue Magnolia, the very club where Julian had plastered his smiling face across the posters. The manager, an old acquaintance named Leroy, picked up. "Alara, been a long time. What can I do for you?" "I want a night," I said firmly. "A set. I've got new pieces. I'm ready to play." There was silence, then a sigh. "Alara, you know I respect you, but the scene's changed. Crowds want the young blood. Julian sells out every night. I can't risk empty tables." My throat tightened. "Leroy, it's my music he's playing. You know it." "I can't prove that. Neither can you. I'm sorry." Click. The rejection stung worse than I expected. But I wasn't giving up. I tried club after club. The Crescent Room, the Velvet Note, the Harbor House. Each conversation ended the same. Respectful voices, polite refusals. Everyone was chasing Julian's fire, and no one wanted a 60-year-old shadow. By evening, I was drained, my fingers raw from dialing numbers, my heart heavier with every no. Mara found me slumped at the piano. "You look like you've been through a war." I laughed bitterly. "War without weapons." She poured 2 glasses of bourbon, slid one to me. "Maybe you don't need their stages. Maybe you make your own." I looked at her, confused. And she leaned in, her eyes fierce. "Think back to when we started. Remember the warehouse gigs, the rooftop shows? We didn't wait for permission. We made the scene." Her words lit a spark. Maybe I didn't need a fancy club. Maybe I needed a place with soul. A place that could hold the fire of a comeback no one saw coming. And just like that, an image appeared in my mind. An abandoned theater on Esplanade Avenue, boarded up for years. Dusty, forgotten. But with the right touch, it could sing again. I smiled for the first time in days. If Julian thought he owned the city's stages, he was about to find out. I could build my own. The old Esplanade Theater had been closed since Hurricane Katrina. Windows shattered, velvet seats torn, the stage warped by water stains. Dust hung in the air like ghosts of applause. Most people avoided it, said it was cursed. But when I stood there in the silence, I didn't hear curses. I heard potential. I ran my hand across the broken piano shoved in the corner, its keys yellow and cracked. "We can fix this," I whispered, though the room smelled of mildew and rot. Mara raised her eyebrows. "Alara, this place looks like it could collapse on our heads." "Then we'll hold it up with our music," I said, a fire sparking inside me. The next weeks became a blur of sweat and stubbornness. Mara called in old musician friends. Omar, a sound tech we used to gig with, dragged in borrowed speakers. Local kids from the neighborhood helped sweep, hammer, paint. It was chaos, but every stroke of paint, every string tightened, every light bulb screwed in. The theater came back to life. Late one night, when everyone had gone home, I sat alone at the restored piano. The room was quiet, smelling of fresh paint and sawdust. My fingers drifted across the keys, playing one of my unreleased melodies. The notes echoed beautifully, filling the space like it was waiting for me all along. This is it, I thought, my stage, my night. But doubt still gnawed at me. Would anyone come? Could an old woman pull a crowd when Julian owned the spotlight? The next morning, Mara burst in waving a flyer mock-up. "Look, underground concert, one night only, the return of Alara." I stared at the design, my name in bold, a silhouette of a trumpet under a crescent moon. My heart skipped. "This could work," I whispered. But as we plastered the flyers around the quarter, whispers followed us. Some laughed, some pitied, others warned. "You know Julian's people won't like this. He'll see it as an attack." Good, because that's exactly what it was. Still, unease lurked under my pride. I was poking the hornet's nest. Julian had the industry, the press, the fans. If he came for me publicly, could I withstand it? I stood in the theater that night, staring at the empty seats. I clenched my fists, forcing the fear down. Julian had stolen my music. But soon he'd face me on a stage he couldn't control. And when that night came, the city would hear the truth. Within a week, the flyers had spread across New Orleans like wildfire. The return of Alara, one night only, unreleased originals. At first, people laughed. Who's gonna go see a 60-year-old play in a busted theater? But whispers grew louder each day. Street musicians passed the flyers between sets. Bartenders slid them under beer glasses. Students at the music school whispered, "They say she's got pieces Julian never touched." The city was curious. One night, as Mara and I pasted another flyer on Bourbon Street, I overheard two tourists. "Alara, isn't that the woman they say Julian studied under?" "Yeah. Word is she's got receipts. Real songs, never heard before." My heart thudded. The rumor was working. But rumors cut both ways. Julian's face was still everywhere, on posters, in club windows, on streaming ads. He basked in the glow of his rising fame. Yet the night after our flyers hit the quarter, I noticed something new. A subtle tension in his smile when the cameras flashed. 2 days later, Mara stormed into the theater, clutching her phone. "He's talking about you." I froze. "What do you mean?" She showed me a video clip from an interview. Julian sat in a velvet chair, smirking at the camera. "Look, I respect the old guard," he said. "But sometimes, older musicians cling to things that aren't theirs. Memory plays tricks. Inspiration becomes ownership. I'm here to bring jazz forward, not to fight ghosts from the past." Ghosts. The word sank into me like poison. He was painting me as senile, confused, irrelevant. Mara slammed her fist on the piano. "He's scared. That's why he's saying this. He knows you're coming." I wanted to believe her, but doubt gnawed at me. What if the city bought his story? What if they saw me as nothing more than a bitter relic chasing shadows? That night, I wandered the quarter again. A street saxophonist spotted me, paused mid-song, and said quietly, "Alara, if you're really playing, I'll be there, and I'll bring people." His words steadied me. Not everyone saw me as a ghost. Back at the theater, I opened my notebook and stared at a song I had never dared to play for anyone. A piece called Ashes and Rain. It was raw, painful, beautiful, written after my husband died. Too personal to ever release. But maybe this was the time. Maybe truth wasn't just about exposing Julian, but exposing myself, my heart, my soul. I set my fingers on the keys, trembling. The melody poured out, filling the theater with something deeper than rage. It was grief, transformed into fire. And in that moment, I knew, if I bared everything on stage, no one could deny who the music belonged to. The theater was alive again. Mara had rounded up old bandmates from the 80s, Marcus on bass, Delilah on drums, and even Omar agreed to mix sound. Younger players from the quarter drifted in too, eager to be part of something historic. We rehearsed late into the nights. The walls shook with rhythm. My fingers found strength I thought I'd lost. When I played Ashes and Rain for the first time with the full band, the room fell silent after the last note. Marcus whispered, "Alara, that's the real stuff. That's the kind of music people remember." For the first time in years, I felt proud again. But pride is dangerous. It attracts eyes. 3 days later, I arrived at the theater and found the locks broken. Inside, cables were cut, speakers slashed open, and the piano strings snapped. It looked like a massacre. Mara swore so hard her voice echoed. "This is Julian. Who else would do this?" My chest tightened. The sabotage wasn't just vandalism. It was a warning. Stay down or we'll make you. Omar knelt by the wires, shaking his head. "We can fix it. Might take all night, but we'll fix it." Delilah slammed her sticks on the drum kit. "Damn right we will. He wants us scared. Let's give him louder music instead." We spent the night repairing what we could, stringing cables, tightening bolts, tuning the battered piano until its voice came alive again. My hands were blistered, my back ached. But when dawn broke, the theater was ready to sing once more. Still, I couldn't shake the fear. If Julian had the nerve to send people to wreck the place, what else could he do? That night, I dreamed of stepping onto stage, only to have the lights cut and the crowd vanish. I woke sweating, my heart pounding. But when I walked back into the theater, saw Mara hanging fresh curtains, saw Omar soldering wires back together, saw Marcus humming bass lines, I knew quitting wasn't an option. Julian had stolen my music, tried to erase my legacy. Now he was trying to smash the stage itself. But he was about to learn something the hard way. You can break instruments. You can cut cables, but you can't silence a soul that refuses to stop playing. Word of my underground concert spread faster than I expected. Neighborhood kids whispered about it on the street. A group of college musicians even came to the theater, begging to sit in on rehearsals. The energy around us was electric. It felt like New Orleans itself was holding its breath. But Julian wasn't going to stay quiet. One morning, Mara burst into the theater waving her phone. "Alara, you need to see this." It was a glossy magazine spread, Julian on the cover, trumpet in hand, headline screaming, "The Future of Jazz." Inside, the article praised him as the savior of the genre. And buried halfway down was a quote that made my blood boil. "Alara is a legend, sure, but legends belong in history books, not on stage. We should honor her contributions, but it's time for her to step aside gracefully." Step aside, gracefully. He wanted to bury me alive with compliments, make me sound like an old relic refusing to fade. Delilah slammed the magazine shut. "What a snake! He's scared of you. That's why he's painting you as irrelevant." Marcus added, "If he wasn't threatened, he wouldn't even mention your name." I tried to breathe through the rage, but it coiled tight inside me. For years, I had been generous with my music, with my mentorship, and now Julian was twisting respect into dismissal, turning my name into a footnote in his story. I sat at the piano, my hands trembling, and played Ashes and Rain. The notes came out raw, jagged, broken. The band fell silent. "This is why we fight," I whispered. "Not just for me, for every musician who ever got erased by someone younger, hungrier, and crueler." That night, as we rehearsed, Omar pulled me aside. "Alara, you know he won't stop here. He's going to try something on the night of your show. He'll want to humiliate you." I looked around the theater, the patched curtains, the battered piano, the hopeful faces of my band. Fear twisted my gut, but so did determination. "Then let him come," I said. "I've been humiliated before, but this time I'll be ready." We pushed through rehearsal until midnight. Each note, each beat was fuel for the fire burning in my chest. Julian thought he could smear me into silence. But when the lights went up on my night, the city wouldn't see a ghost. They'd see a storm. The buzz grew louder with each passing day. The old Esplanade Theater, once forgotten, was now on every musician's lips. But so was Julian. One afternoon, Mara rushed in holding a letter, her face pale. "Alara, this came for you." I unfolded the paper and read the words slowly. "Cease and desist." It was from Julian's lawyer, claiming that I was infringing on his intellectual property, that my concert was a deliberate attempt to mislead audiences by performing songs he had already recorded. My knees nearly buckled. He was trying to take me down in court before I even struck a note. Delilah grabbed the paper, cursing, "This is garbage. Everyone knows you wrote those songs decades ago." "Everyone except the ones holding the power," I whispered. For hours, doubt gnawed at me. If the police showed up on concert night, they could shut us down. If the press sided with Julian, my name would be ruined completely. That evening, I sat in the empty theater staring at the stage. My mind screamed, maybe it's safer to stop. Maybe this isn't worth the fight. But then Mara came and sat beside me. She placed her hand gently on mine. "Alara, listen. He's trying to scare you into silence. That's what thieves do. But if you stop now, he wins. If you play, even if they drag you off stage, people will have heard the truth. That's more than he can stand." Her words burned into me like fire. I rose and walked to the piano. Slowly, I played the opening of Ashes and Rain. The melody filled the space, trembling but alive. No lawyer could erase that. No paper could own it. Music is proof, and I had more proof than Julian could ever steal. That night, we made a decision as a band. We would play, no matter who tried to shut us down, no matter what threats came. But deep down, I knew Julian wouldn't stop here. And when the night of the concert came, I had to be ready not just to play, but to fight for my very voice. The cease and desist letter should have crushed me. Instead, it lit a fuse. News of Julian's legal move spread quickly. Some mocked me, calling me desperate. But others began to question, if Julian really wrote those songs, why was he so afraid of an old woman playing hers? A few days later, I received a call from Evelyn, a jazz critic I hadn't spoken to in years. She'd been tough on me back in the day, sometimes cruel, but her voice now carried something else. "Alara," she said, "I've heard whispers. If you're really staging this concert, I want a seat, and I'll bring my pen." I hesitated. Why help me now? Because truth has a sound, and I'd rather write history than lies. That night, Omar pulled me aside after rehearsal. Guess who came by while you were out? Eddie Thompson. My jaw dropped. Eddie was a trumpeter I'd once battled with on stage. A rival who hated me for years. He said, Omar continued, if Alara's really taking on Julian, she's not fighting alone. I sat stunned. My enemies were becoming allies. Julian's arrogance was rallying people who'd once dismissed me. Mara grinned. See? He tried to bury you, but now he's building your army. Still, the pressure grew. Julian went on live radio, scoffing at the idea of my concert. She's trying to cling to relevance. People should respect her retirement. The future belongs to the young. His words stung, but each insult seemed to push more people toward me. Social media buzzed with debate. Team Julian or Team Alara. One night, as I left the theater, a group of young musicians waited outside. They held instruments in battered cases, their eyes wide. Miss Alara, one said nervously, we grew up on your records. If you'll have us, we want to play. Even just one song. Emotion tightened my throat. For so long, I had felt invisible. Now the city's pulse was shifting. The old guard, the critics, even the new blood. All watching, waiting. Julian wanted me erased. But every move he made only sharpened my shadow. The night of the concert was coming fast. And I wasn't standing alone anymore. The concert was only a week away. The theater smelled of fresh paint and sweat, the walls humming with rehearsals every night. The band was tighter, sharper. My voice, through piano, through trumpet, felt alive again. But the closer we got, the darker Julian's shadow grew. 2 nights before dress rehearsal, Mara burst into the theater, her face twisted with fury. Alara, you won't believe this. She shoved her phone into my hand. It was a video, Julian, live on stage at the Blue Magnolia Club. He was smiling at the crowd, his trumpet glistening under the lights. And then I heard it. Ashes and Rain, note for note, he was playing my most private composition, the one I had never shared, the one I had written in grief, the one I had only just rehearsed with the band. My stomach turned, my vision blurred. How did he get it? Mara's voice shook. Someone leaked it. Someone in here. I looked around the theater. My bandmates stared at the floor, guilt and fear flashing across their faces. My heart cracked. Betrayal within betrayal. Julian had taken my deepest wound and paraded it as his triumph. The crowd in the video roared, rising to their feet, chanting his name. Julian! Julian! I dropped the phone, hands trembling. He's stolen everything, I whispered. Omar clenched his jaw. Not everything. He doesn't have you. He doesn't have the truth. Delilah slammed her sticks down. We fight harder. We play louder. He wants to scare you, Alara. But if you walk away now, he wins. I pressed my palms against the piano, trying to steady my breathing. Rage mixed with sorrow until it felt like fire in my veins. Julian thought he could strip me bare, even take the song of my soul. But he didn't understand something. That pain, that grief, that was mine. And when I poured it into the keys, no one, not even Julian, could fake the truth inside it. I looked at my band, at Mara, at the walls of the theater we had rebuilt together. My voice shook, but it was firm. We play, no matter what he does, we play. The band erupted in cheers, clapping, shouting. The fear was still there. But so was fire. And as I sat down at the piano again, I thought of Julian's smug smile on that stage. Let him steal my song. Let him mock my pain. Because when the curtain rose on my night, he'd find out what happens when a thief faces the storm they created. The night of the concert came like a storm. By sundown, the Esplanade Theater buzzed with a nervous energy. Strings of lights glowed against the cracked plaster walls, the air thick with the smell of gumbo drifting from food stalls outside. People lined the street, clutching flyers, murmuring like they were about to witness something forbidden. I stood backstage, my hands trembling over the piano keys, waiting. Mara peeked out through the curtain. Alara, it's packed, standing room only. My knees went weak. I hadn't expected this many. Word had spread farther than I realized. Students, old fans, even rival musicians. They weren't here for nostalgia. They were here for truth. But with the crowd came risk. Omar rushed in, his headset buzzing. We just got word. Julian's people are outside. Some of his fans, too. They're chanting his name. My stomach twisted. Would they storm the show? Would the police arrive with that letter in hand? Delilah slammed her sticks together. Let them chant. We've got music louder than their voices. The band gathered around me. Marcus clapped my shoulder. You've carried us before, Alara. Tonight, we carry you. I swallowed hard, fighting tears. For 60 years, I had stood on stages. But this felt different. This wasn't just music. This was war. The stage manager, a neighborhood kid barely 20, lifted his hand. 1 minute, Miss Alara. My heart pounded like a drum. I closed my eyes, breathing deep, summoning every note, every scar, every ounce of fire inside me. The curtain rose. The crowd erupted. Cheers, applause, gasps. Flashbulbs from old cameras, the glow of smartphones. The theater shook with their energy. I walked slowly to the piano, the lights blinding, my pulse roaring in my ears. My hands hovered over the keys. And then, a voice. From the back of the room, loud and mocking. Play us something original, Ghost. The words sliced through the air, a Julian fan. The crowd stirred, whispers rising, my chest clenched. This was exactly what Julian wanted, to rattle me before the first note. I stared at the piano, my fingers trembled. The room waited, the silence heavy. And then I whispered to myself, this is mine. This is all mine. I struck the first chord of Ashes and Rain. The sound burst out raw, haunting, filling the theater like thunder. The jeers vanished. The whispers died. The city of New Orleans was listening. The first notes of Ashes and Rain poured out like a confession. Every chord carried years of loss, betrayal, and love, stitched together into something raw and undeniable. The crowd leaned forward, silent, their faces glowing in the stage lights. Some closed their eyes. Some wiped tears. For a moment, I forgot Julian existed. It was just me, my piano, and the truth. Then the doors slammed open. I froze mid-phrase. Gasps rippled through the theater. Heads turned. And there he was, Julian Cole. Sharp suit, trumpet case in hand, arrogance dripping from his smile. He strolled down the aisle like he owned the place. The whispers grew louder. Is that him? What's he doing here? He stopped in the middle row, turned to the crowd, and raised his hands like a preacher. Ladies and gentlemen, I see we're enjoying a tribute tonight. His voice oozed false charm. I should know. I wrote that piece she's playing. Boos erupted. Some clapped. The room was split. My heart hammered in my chest. My hands hovered over the keys, trembling. This was the nightmare I had feared. Him stealing the stage in front of my audience. Mara stormed forward, shouting from the wings. Liar! Everyone knows it's hers. Julian smirked, pulling his trumpet from the case. Why don't we let the music decide? A duel. You play, I play. Let the people hear the truth. The crowd roared, half in excitement, half in disbelief. I stared at him, my blood boiling. For 60 years, I had played to honor the music. Never for ego, never for war. But tonight was different. Tonight, my legacy was on the line. Slowly, I rose from the piano bench. My knees ached, my hands shook. But my voice rang clear. You want a duel? Fine. But you should know one thing, Julian. The theater fell silent, waiting. I leaned closer to the mic, my eyes burning into his. You can steal notes, but you'll never steal soul. The crowd erupted, cheering, stomping, clapping. Julian's smirk faltered just for a second. And then he raised the trumpet to his lips. The duel was about to begin. Julian lifted his trumpet, eyes locked on me like a predator sizing up its prey. The room held its breath. Then he blew. A cascade of notes burst out, smooth, polished, technically flawless. The sound was bright, golden, dazzling. He played like a man showing off a trophy, every phrase designed to impress. The crowd clapped, some even whistled, caught up in the flash of it. But beneath the gloss, I heard hollowness. He was echoing what he'd stolen, playing notes without weight, without scars. When he lowered the trumpet, he smirked, arms spread wide. Beat that, Ghost. The word cut deep, but I didn't flinch. I sat back at the piano, hands steady now. I didn't chase perfection. I let my fingers find the truth. Ashes and Rain rose again, but this time heavier, deeper. My hands pounded the keys with grief, lifted them with defiance. The melody twisted, grew rawer, alive with every wound Julian could never know. The crowd leaned in. The applause faded into silence, everyone caught in the weight of it. I saw faces wet with tears. A young man clutched his chest. An old woman bowed her head like in prayer. When the final chord rang, The theater stayed still. No clapping, just breathless silence. The kind that only truth can carve out of a room. Then the roar came. Alara! Alara! The walls shook with their voices. They weren't chanting for youth or flash or ego. They were chanting for soul. Julian's smirk faltered. He raised the trumpet again, desperate. He blasted out a furious riff, faster, higher, louder, showing off everything technique could buy. But the more he played, the thinner it sounded. The crowd clapped politely, then turned back to me. I felt power flood my chest. 60 years of silence, of giving, of being erased. All of it burned now into fire. I rose from the bench, looked him dead in the eye, and said into the mic, "You've got notes, Julian. I've got stories." The crowd erupted again, stomping, clapping, chanting my name. For the first time, Julian looked small. But I knew he wouldn't give up without one last strike. And the night wasn't over yet. The crowd's chants still thundered in my ears. Julian lowered his trumpet, sweat glistening on his brow. His smirk flickered, then hardened. He wasn't finished. "Fine," he said into the mic, his voice sharp. "If you want proof, let's give them proof." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled notebook. He held it high, like a trophy. My blood ran cold. It was mine. One of my old leather-bound notebooks. The one I'd shown him years ago when he was still just a student. When I believed in him. Gasps rippled through the audience. Julian flipped it open, pages yellow under the lights. "Look here, ladies and gentlemen. See these scribbles? Inspiration, yes. But who shaped them? Who gave them life? Me." A murmur ran through the theater. Some looked confused, others angry. He was twisting the evidence, framing himself as the genius who refined my ramblings. Mara's voice cut through from the wings. "Lies. Everyone here knows Alara's soul is in those pages." Julian ignored her. He turned back to the crowd, his voice dripping with false confidence. "This is what separates legends from relics. Legends inspire, relics cling." The words stabbed deep. I felt the weight of 60 years pressing down, every doubt screaming that maybe he was right. Maybe the world had moved on, and I was just clinging. But then my eyes fell on the crowd. A young girl clutching a trumpet case, tears streaking her face. An old man whispering, "That's her song." My bandmates standing firm behind me, fists clenched, eyes blazing. The notebook didn't matter, not anymore. I stepped up to the mic, my voice low but steady. "Julian, you can wave my pages all you want. But everyone in this room just heard the truth. And truth doesn't need ink to survive. It sings, it bleeds, and it never lies." The crowd erupted, louder than before, stomping and clapping until the walls shook. Some chanted my name again, others booed Julian outright. His face darkened. For the first time, the mask of arrogance cracked. He slammed the notebook shut, gripping it so tight his knuckles went white. I returned to the piano, my hands steady now, stronger than ever. If he wanted to play dirty, then let him. Because I had something he could never steal, the crowd's soul. And when I struck the first note of my next song, I knew. The night was mine to finish. I pressed my fingers to the keys, and the theater fell silent again. This time, I didn't play for Julian. I didn't play for the crowd. I played for the girl I used to be. 20 years old, sneaking into clubs with fire in her chest. I played for the woman I became. 60 years old, scarred, betrayed, but still breathing music. The song was new, born right there on the stage. A fusion of everything: grief, rage, love, defiance. Notes I had never written, but had always lived. The band followed instinctively. Marcus's bass thumped like a heartbeat. Delilah's drums cracked like thunder. Omar swelled the sound until the walls shook. And then something magical happened. The crowd began to sway, clap, move with us. The theater pulsed like a living organism. Strangers reached for each other's hands. A young trumpet player in the front row wept openly. Julian stood frozen in the aisle, trumpet dangling uselessly at his side. He tried to shout something, but his words drowned under the roar of music. His control was slipping. When the final crescendo hit, the whole theater erupted into a standing ovation. People screamed my name, stomped their feet, begged for more. I rose from the piano, chest heaving, sweat dripping, and looked directly at Julian. "This is the difference," I said into the mic, my voice hoarse but clear. "You play for fame, I play for life, and life always wins." The crowd exploded. Some booed Julian outright. Others began chanting louder than ever. Alara, Alara, Alara. His face twisted with fury. He tried to raise the trumpet again, but the crowd turned away. They weren't his anymore. For the first time, I saw it. The thief dethroned, not by lawyers or papers, but by the one thing he could never counterfeit: soul. But I also knew he wasn't done. And when he finally snapped, he might try to take me down in the ugliest way yet. The roar of the crowd still echoed when Julian snapped. His face twisted, red with rage. He shoved through the audience, storming toward the stage. People shouted, some tried to block him, but he pushed past, trumpet in hand like a weapon. He leapt onto the stage, grabbing the mic stand. "Enough," he bellowed, his voice cracking. "You're all being fooled. She's nothing but a washed-up fraud, stealing my songs, clinging to glory that isn't hers." The crowd booed. Some shouted back, "We heard her first." Others screamed, "Get off the stage." Julian's eyes darted wildly. He turned to me, jabbing the trumpet toward my chest. "Admit it, Alara. You'd be nothing without me. Nothing." My breath caught. For a moment, the old fear returned, the weight of erasure, the pain of being dismissed. But then I saw the truth. He wasn't powerful anymore. He was desperate, exposed. A man cornered, trying to claw back what he had already lost. I stepped toward him, close enough for the mic to catch my voice. "Julian, look at them. Look at their faces. Do you hear them chanting your name, or mine?" The crowd roared again. "Alara! Alara!" His grip faltered. I reached for the notebook still clutched in his hand, the one he had paraded like a weapon earlier. Slowly, deliberately, I pulled it free. He didn't stop me. He couldn't. Holding it up to the crowd, I opened to the page where ashes and rain lived in my own handwriting. The ink was faded, the paper torn, but the truth was there, raw and undeniable. "This," I said, voice trembling but strong, "isn't his. It was never his, and it never will be." The theater exploded with cheers, stomps, shouts. People stood on chairs, clapping, chanting my name. Julian dropped his trumpet with a clatter. His face crumpled, fury giving way to something uglier: shame. Security moved in, hands outstretched, but he shoved past them and fled through the side door, vanishing into the night. I stood frozen, chest heaving, the notebook shaking in my hand. For a moment, silence fell again. And then Mara whispered from the wings, "Alara, you just took back everything." The stage was mine again. The trumpet lay abandoned, the notebook clutched in my hand like a relic reclaimed. The crowd still roared, their energy vibrating through my bones. But I knew the night wasn't finished, not yet. I walked back to the piano, slow, deliberate, every step echoing like a drumbeat of defiance. The band followed my lead, their eyes wide, waiting. I sat down, placed the notebook gently on top of the piano, and pressed my fingers to the keys. "This," I said into the mic, my voice carrying through the theater, "isn't about him anymore. This is for us, for every story stolen, every voice silenced, every soul told they were too old, too broken, too forgotten. Tonight, we rise." The crowd roared. Some wept, some raised their fists. The energy was electric. I began to play. The piece wasn't written, not in ink, not in memory. It was born right there. A storm of sound, weaving jazz, blues, gospel, all the rhythms of New Orleans. The band surged with me. Drums rolled like thunder. Bass growled like the earth itself. Brass pierced the air like lightning. And then something happened that I'll never forget. The audience began to sing, wordless at first, then humming, then voices rising in harmony. Strangers holding hands, swaying, crying, shouting. The music wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to all of us. I closed my eyes, tears streaming, and poured everything into those final chords. Grief, betrayal, love, survival. All of it bleeding into sound. When the last note rang out, silence followed. Not empty, but sacred. Then came the eruption. The theater shook as hundreds of voices screamed my name. Flowers flew to the stage. Strangers shouted, "We love you, Alara!" I rose from the piano, trembling, clutching the notebook to my chest. For the first time in years, I didn't feel erased. I felt infinite. Julian was gone, his theft, his lies, his arrogance, scattered like ashes in the wind. And I was still here, standing, singing, alive. But deep inside, I knew the night had shifted more than just for me. Something bigger had started, and the world would hear it soon. The morning after, New Orleans still buzzed. The Esplanade Theater was quiet now, but the city wasn't. People in coffee shops replayed shaky videos of the concert, voices trembling with excitement. Musicians whispered my name in smoky bars. My phone lit up with hundreds of missed calls and messages. Journalists, old friends, strangers who had been in the crowd. The story spread fast. Veteran jazz legend reclaimed stage. Protégé exposed as fraud during live show. New Orleans witnesses a musical uprising. Every headline had my name. For decades, I had been ignored, pushed aside, forgotten. But now, I was everywhere. Mara burst into my kitchen, waving her phone. Alara! The video's viral, millions of views. People are calling it the night jazz was reborn. I laughed, a sound half disbelieving, half relieved. Reborn, huh? Guess I'm not a ghost after all. But the attention brought more than praise. By noon, Julian's lawyer had already sent threats. He accused me of defamation, of sabotaging his career, of staging the notebook as a prop. His fans filled my inbox with venom, calling me a liar, a thief, too old to matter. The sting of their words cut deep. For every voice cheering me on, there was another trying to drag me down. I stared at the notebook on my table, its worn leather edges glowing in the sunlight. It was proof, yes, but proof alone wouldn't protect me. Mara leaned across the table. You have something stronger than lawyers, Alara. You have the people. Use that. Don't hide now. Double down. Speak louder. Her words burned in my chest. For 60 years, I had kept quiet, letting others take the spotlight. But maybe silence had been my biggest mistake. That night, I drafted a message, not to Julian, not to his lawyer, to the world. I recorded a video of myself at the piano, the notebook open beside me. My voice shook, but it carried. My name is Alara James. Last night, you heard my story in music, but let me tell it plain. For decades, I wrote songs that were stolen, dismissed, forgotten. I was told I was too old to matter, but last night, I remembered something. Truth doesn't age. Soul doesn't fade. And music belongs to everyone who listens, not to thieves who claim it. I ended with a single line. This is not just about me. This is about every artist whose voice has been silenced. And we will not be silent anymore. I hit upload. And as the video spread, I realized something terrifying and beautiful. This wasn't just revenge anymore. It was revolution. The days after my video were a blur. My phone didn't stop buzzing. Journalists wanted interviews. Universities asked me to speak. Musicians from across the country sent messages of solidarity. Some even shared their own stories. Songs stolen, credits erased, contracts that bled them dry. It was like a dam breaking. People weren't just hearing my story, they were telling theirs. And for the first time, the silence that had smothered so many of us cracked wide open. Mara grinned as she scrolled through her phone. Look at this, Alara. Attack Soul Not Stolen is trending. People are using your words like a banner. I blinked. A banner? She nodded. You didn't just play a concert. You started something. The thought both thrilled and terrified me. I was just a musician, not an activist. I had spent my life hunched over a piano, not marching in the streets. But every time I saw another young artist's testimony, trembling voices, broken dreams, stolen songs, I felt a fire spark. Julian tried to fight back. He went on radio shows, claiming I was bitter, delusional, trying to ride his coattails. His lawyers filed more papers, threatening lawsuits. But the tide was turning. For every lie he told, there were a dozen voices rising against him. Clubs started canceling his shows. Labels distanced themselves. He was no longer the prodigy. He was the pariah. One night, I sat at the piano alone, notebook open, staring at the faded ink of ashes and rain. I whispered to myself, this was supposed to be revenge, just revenge. But it had become more, a movement, a reckoning, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to be its face. Mara came in quietly, sitting beside me. You don't have to carry it alone, she said. But you can't step back now, Alara. People need you. They're listening. For the first time, they're really listening. Her words hit hard. I looked at my hands, worn, scarred, trembling, and thought of all the years I'd let others steal my sound. Maybe this was the reason I had survived so long, not just to play, but to fight. I closed the notebook, stood, and whispered, then let's make it louder. The weeks that followed felt unreal. Clips of my concert played on late-night TV. Journalists called me the grandmother of a revolution. Young musicians messaged me every day, thanking me, begging me to keep speaking. My face, my wrinkled, time-worn face, appeared on posters, murals, even t-shirts. I should have felt proud, and I did. But it also terrified me. Because revolutions don't just lift you, they consume you. One night, Mara burst into my apartment, phone in hand. Alara, you've been invited to the National Arts Forum in D.C. They want you to speak about artist rights, in front of lawmakers, journalists, everyone. My hands shook as I set the piano lid down. Lawmakers? Mara, I'm not a politician. I'm just a musician who got angry. She grabbed my shoulders, eyes fierce. That's why they need you, not another suit with empty promises. You, with truth in your voice. The weight pressed on me. I thought of my concert, of Julian's collapse, of the crowd chanting my name. Had I really started something I couldn't step back from? The night before the forum, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the piano, notebook open, staring at the faded ink of ashes and rain. My fingers hovered over the keys but wouldn't move. Fear whispered, "You're too old, they'll laugh. They'll call you bitter, broken, irrelevant." But then I remembered the girl in the front row, tears running down her cheeks as she clutched her trumpet. The voices chanting Alara until the theater shook. Mara's words, they're listening. The next day, I walked onto the stage in D.C. Not a concert hall, a forum lined with microphones, cameras, faces in suits. My heart hammered harder than it ever had in New Orleans. I leaned toward the mic, hands trembling. My name is Alara James. I am 60 years old, and I am not finished. Gasps rippled, cameras clicked. I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. I stand here not just for myself, but for every artist who has ever been silenced, for every song stolen, every voice erased, every dream dismissed as too old, too naive, too inconvenient. We are not relics, we are not ghosts. We are the soul of this world, and souls do not fade. Applause shook the hall. Some stood, clapping, others wiped tears. I felt something shift, bigger than any ovation I'd ever known. But as I stepped off the stage, Mara whispered urgently in my ear, "Alara, Julian's here, and he's not alone." Months passed. The storm Julian had unleashed faded into silence. His name slipped from headlines, his shows canceled, his fans scattered. He became a ghost in the very city he once tried to claim. But me, I was louder than ever. The Soul Not Stolen movement grew, stretching beyond New Orleans, beyond jazz, beyond music. Young artists in Los Angeles, poets in Chicago, dancers in Atlanta, they all used it, raising their own voices, reclaiming what was stolen. I didn't plan to lead, but the world kept listening. One evening, I was invited to a TED stage. As I walked out under the bright red letters, applause crashing like waves, I clutched that old leather notebook to my chest. The same notebook Julian had tried to twist into his proof of genius. I opened it slowly, showing the crowd the faded handwriting. "These pages," I began, "were once stolen. But what's written in here? The world can't take that from me anymore." I played a short passage on the piano set up behind me. The melody of ashes and rain filled the hall. Not mournful now, but triumphant. When I looked up, I saw them, thousands of faces, lit with awe, many wet with tears. And I said, "Revenge is sweet, yes, but justice. Justice is eternal. Tonight, I don't just take back my story, I give it to you. And you will write the next verses." The standing ovation was thunder. In that moment, I felt the weight of 60 years lift. Betrayal had scarred me, yes, but it hadn't defined me. What defined me was what I chose to do with the scar. Turn it into a song that would outlive both me and Julian. As I left the stage, Mara whispered in my ear, "You did it, Alara. You turned revenge into a revolution." And for the first time in my long, turbulent career, I believed her. I wasn't just Alara James, the woman whose music was stolen. I was Alara James, the woman who made sure it could never be silenced again.